here we go. So welcome,
Right.
John.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate that you've taken
I can't
time
hear
out.
you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Oh, maybe it's my
You can.
yes,
speaker.
yes, I can. I
Yeah.
can hear you both fine.
Ah, you can. Okay. Please go ahead. Sorry. I will check my audio.
Wolfgang can't hear me. Okay. So thank you for taking time out of your leisure time or relaxing time. I hope this will be of value to you. So what I'm going to do is go through a case study that typically shows what I do. It's based on a systems thinking methodology that is applied to designing services, and I'm going to share my screen. Oh no, I can't. Could someone please enable me to put my slide up? Can you hear me, Wolfgang? Hello, Wolfgang. Sorry about this, everybody. Maybe if someone, Brian, can you just say something? Maybe he can hear you.
Wolfgang, can you enable John's ability to present?
Ah, Wolfgang, can you hear me? Oh dear. That's strange, isn't it? Okay. Very weird.
Okay, I see your presentation now.
Okay, so I presume everyone else can hear. I will continue. Unfortunately, for some reason, Wolfgang cannot hear me, which is very strange. I never had that on LinkedIn before. Okay, so here we go. So if you do want to put any comments while I talk, I might not be able to read them. I will try, but anyway. Okay, so this is a case study that I use for service designers to help them see different ways of doing service designs. The primary focus of it is about dealing with complexity, and I think that's really important to understand. This isn't about a transactional service. This is a complex service in the public sector. Christ. Okay, hang on. And what I'm going to show you is manually. It's already manual. Shit. Let's do it there. And where we are, there we go. So in Britain, we have a £20 note. So can you, I hope you can all see this.
I can.
Great. Okay, so we have a £20 note that came out of circulation last year. But what's interesting about that £20 note is the comment that's on here: the division of labour in pin manufacturing and the great increase in the quantity of work that results. Now that was Adam Smith in 1776, and that was defining the way that was one of the foundations of the Industrial Revolution, where the way that you made things was split into different functions, into different departments, and different people did different elements of that. And that was also where the assembly line came from Ford, etc. So that was the kind of thinking that has been a part of our lives since that time. But one interesting observation is that this is what happens to the people who work in that system. And this is from Adam Smith and what he wrote. It's they become as stupid and ignorant as it is possible for a human creature to become. So this is the birth of what Frederick Taylor talked about scientific management, and it is the picture of this is an organization as a machine.
You haven't switched slides yet.
Shit. I haven't switched slides. Okay, this is not going well.
You were still on Why Are We Here?
Sorry about that. I don't know what's happening. What can you see?
Our view of organization.
Okay, great. So
There we go.
basically, that's the £20 note. I apologize. That's the £20 note that we have with the comment, the division of labour in pin manufacturing. And what Adam Smith said was that people in that system become as stupid and ignorant as possible for a human creature to become. And I've talked about this. The view of an organization is an organization like a machine. Okay. And that's interesting because that has been the basis of the way that we see organizations as a hierarchy based on functions, based on departments. People have roles within that organization, and those roles are defined by job descriptions. And people are measured against the job descriptions. I'm talking about in a very sort of, in some ways, a theoretical way. And managers believe that their role is to oversee that department and make sure that department works in the way that it should be working, against a set of predefined criteria. So the predefined criteria might be using procedures, procedures that are used by frontline staff to help them guide the work that they're meant to do. So the first thing about this is that systems thinking is about a different way of thinking. It's about a different way of seeing an organization, not like a machine. Okay. Oh, your audio works, Wolfgang. Great, fantastic. So this is what I want to focus on as well this evening, about the machine-based design, Frederick Taylor, etc. So where do we start? So we started with an organization here where the deputy director said, we don't want any big change. We have some issues with the current way that we're working, and we're testing you to see what you're able to do because we haven't really tried your approach before. And I had little idea as to what I was actually going to do, okay? Because this was an area that I'd never worked in before. So I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. So the methodology I follow tends to be based on the design thinking double diamond approach, which is basically, in the language that I use with clients, the first stage is understand. The second stage is this is understand the current system. The second stage is you experiment with different ways of working. The third stage is you develop a working prototype. And the fourth stage is that becomes the normal way of working. Okay. From a systems thinking perspective, it's about changing the perspective of how you see. And interestingly enough, where do you start from a systems thinking perspective? Well, where we start here is we start with, what is the purpose of this service? The service has been created for a reason, and we start with purpose. An organization or a service does not happen because someone wants to create a service. You can't just make that happen. You've got to sell something, you've got to do something. And this case study was in local government, was about local housing. So this is about social government housing for people who need support, who are not able to find housing themselves. Okay, so the purpose, when I asked the team on the first day, they said, our purpose is we give people a house. Okay, that sounds good. And so what I then ask is, what is the demand into the system through? And this demand into the system is through a 14-page form, either online or on paper. So at this point, where I have started is I have asked for a team of 3 frontline staff to work full-time with me for 4 weeks in the understand phase. And this is what we're going to be doing. So this is what I learn. And so I have leadership. So I have the deputy director is working with us. He comes in every few days. I have the team that I've just described. The purpose that we have is to learn. And the design will emerge from our learning. So I don't have any preconceived ideas what the design is going to be. And they all have ideas as what it's going to be, but I ignore them. And this is about engaging with the customer or the resident and engaging myself with the team and with the senior managers. and I do not write a report at the end of this. That is the death of this, and I will talk more about that a bit later. So we understand the service as a system. So how do we do that? Well, firstly, you have a service and the demand comes into the organization, and what we do is we look at the demand, we look at what type of demand, we look at what matters to the customer at that point where it comes into the organization. And from that, we look at what the purpose is, because the purpose as defined by the customer, that's what I'm interested in. And then we look at how do we react to that demand? How well do we react as an organization? And that is reflected by how good is our service. Do we delay the response? Do we give the wrong response? Do we give a partial response? What do we do to people when they come to us for help? And then we look at the end-to-end workflow all the way through the organization. And when I say all the way through, it's defined by not just the organization, but defined by the person's journey. And if the person's journey means they go to a charity or another organization, we follow that flow. So this is defined by the journey of the customer. And then we look at why is it designed that way? Why did someone come in and design it that way? Why did the managers design it this way? And then we come and look at what is our thinking, what is our approach and behavior that has created this design. So this is more, 5 and 6 are more to do with the management side of the organization, because typically managers design the service that they are working or they are managing. Okay. So we start with demand. So in the first week, we started with demand, and we start with categorizing demand in two ways. The first way is value demand. So that's the demand that we're here for. That's the demand that aligns to the purpose. And in this case, it's I'm in need of housing. Can you help me solve my housing problem? I want to move, etc. And then you have failure demands. And failure demands are those demands that are created by the design of our service. So I don't like your decision. I don't like what you've told me. I refuse the property. I want to do something that you've asked me to, but I don't know how to do it. This is some information you've asked me for. So what's interesting is the percentage of failure demand was 62.7% and value demand was 37.3%. Now at that point, a senior manager who's been paying attention will recognize something very interesting, and we will recognize that if you had a perfect service, failure demand should be 0. If you had a design of a perfect service, failure demand should be 0 in a perfect service. It should only have value demand. So at this point, the manager gets the first idea that there's significant issues here. They never even thought of looking at demand this way. Measures. So how do you measure this from a systems thinking perspective? And of course they had lots of measures. So if I asked you, how would we measure this? The answer would be, from a systems thinking perspective, ask the customer. The customer is the person who the service is designed for. How about measuring what they would measure? And we talked about this with the team, and they came up with what we would do is we would measure the end-to-end from when someone says, hello, I need help, to when I get help. The end-to-end. Okay? So they didn't do this. So we had to get the raw data and we had to track the end-to-end of people that came to us that we gave houses to. Okay? Now this organization had 3 categories: gold, silver, and bronze. Bronze was the people that are in need but not so bad. The gold was people in the highest need, and silver was somewhere in between. So we looked at bronze band. This is bronze band, and on average, this is a capability chart, and on average it takes 675 days for someone on bronze band to get housing. And the manager thought, well, that's not great, but they're on bronze band, so maybe that's okay. Let's have a look at silver band. Well, silver band was even worse. Silver band was 750 days. And by this time, the manager was getting worried, thinking, shit, what's going to, at least we got gold band. Gold band was 675 days. So on average, it takes 675 days. In some cases, it takes longer. In some cases, it takes shorter. So at this point, the manager realized that he had greater problems with his service than he thought. So gold band are people with serious need of being moved. And not only that, there are many people who don't actually get a house. So this is just the people that get a house. So this is an example of using systems thinking to measure from a different perspective, gives the manager a different perspective of their service. And then what we did in the team, this was in week 2, we then looked at the end-to-end flow. So we started to do all the flows of all the different sections. We took 16 demands at random. We chose 16 demands and we analyzed those 16 demands in detail. And one person in the team, it was quite interesting, there was one person in the team who didn't really understand what we were doing. And she came to me several times saying, I don't think I want to be in the team. I don't think I understand. I don't understand what you're doing. I don't think I'm the right person. And I didn't want to lose her because we only had 3 people in the team. So if I went down to 2, that was serious. So I asked her to focus on one person and imagine you are that person and go through the journey of what it was been like. And she did that. She spent the whole day doing that. She phoned her up, she talked to her, and then she suddenly got the perspective of what it was like for the customer. And she suddenly realized that it took 13 months for this person to get the final decision as to what band they are. 13 months. And she had to submit all this information, and she had to keep phoning up, and then the person in the team realized what we were doing, and luckily then she didn't want to leave. Okay. And if you ask the people in the team, what's it like to work here? Well, we always take the demands using application forms. So we don't talk to people. So we're not allowed to talk to people. Customers, in fact, customers are awful, and we don't want to talk to them anyway because they're aggressive. They swear at us. They lie. When I do talk to people, so one person in the team said, if I'm going to talk to people, it has to be behind glass, okay, protective glass. And actually, the way that we work is defined by the IT. And we have no idea how capable we are. We don't know whether we're doing a good service or not. We just do what we're told to do. And the supervisor said to me the day I started, John, the only way you can help us is to give us 6,000 houses, because there were 6,000 people waiting for housing. 6,000 people. This is not a big town, okay? 6,000 people on the waiting list. So the manager says, to solve our problem, give me 6,000 houses. So at this point, I was a bit worried because I didn't know how I was going to supply 6,000 houses to solve their problem. And they thought that their work was managing IT. They had 3 computer screens in front of them, and they spent all their day looking at forms, looking at screens, looking at information in front of them. That was what they did in terms of their job. And they came up with a picture of how their system worked, a summary picture. And you'll recognize that all the artifacts I'm showing you have been created by the team. So the team do the work, not me. And this is a schematic version to make it more helpful. So a form comes in online or paper. If it's in the paper, it comes in the post. It has to be indexed against the record of the person. We then have to check the information that it's correct. We then give them a banding, and we always give them, if they're new, we give them a bronze band because we don't know yet about their medical problem. So if they have a medical issue, they have to submit information from the doctor. We have to prove all that. And if they disagree with the banding, the categories, they can appeal. Okay, so they can say, I don't agree, and we have to have a meeting about this and all sorts. And then if they have a medical, if they pass the medical, they will perhaps change their band to silver or gold. And then over time, as they're on the waiting list for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we have to update their details when their details change. Okay. And very often there's all this. This is where the information goes back to the customer. Okay, where they need to change this, or where we send some information in the post or email saying this is your band. And then we await for the advertisement online. So we wait for the houses to come up every 2 weeks. You get the houses that come up. Bronze, silver, and gold are curious names. It's common in this country. Maybe it is. So an advert goes out every 2 weeks. The people who say, oh, I like that house, I want to bid on it. So you bid, and the organisation has to match the people to the bid, and they have to come up with one person. They offer that person the house, and that person decides, yes, I'm going to have the house, or I'm not going to have the house. So this is a design that has a very interesting history, which I'm not going to go through at all. But the 95% of housing allocations in England are done this way. And you can ask. I always ask the team, people at this point, how would you improve that? So if you're a service designer, how would you improve it? And they come up with ideas about making it digital and all this kind of stuff, making information available. So because of our time, I'm not going to do that here. But you can think. You can think about how you might design that if you were in that organization. There were 6,000 people on the list. Now, this is what I then did with the team. We took a month's worth of data and we said, right, in 1 month there were 285 applications, new applications. 75% of that information that came in was wrong, and we had to send a letter back and they had to resubmit the information. The medical applications took on average 6 months, and there were 95 in a month, and there were 27 appeals every month. 27 appeals, one a day, and they hated appeals because they were really difficult to do. They just hated them. I'm not going to go into that. They took 7 months on average to do. There were 105 advertisements. 2,600 people would bid for those advertisements. 35 people would refuse the houses that if they were offered them, and then 87 people were housed. So this is just a typical month. So this is still in the understand phase. So then I asked them at the end of this, what's the purpose? So they said the purpose is to give people a house. And actually, they then changed it to, we just process application forms. We don't give people houses. We process application forms. And because we have so few houses, our job is to make it difficult for people to get houses. Okay? 6,000 people on the waiting list, 37 houses a month. What do you do? Okay. So we finished the understand and we went to the experiment. Okay, so the experiment, what we do is we leave the current organization and we go into a room and I give them a new set of principles. Take a case from the demand, take a demand and take it through to completion, complete completion. What matters to the person determines the design of the flow. So you don't have any procedures. What matters to the person, the customer, will design what you do. Only do the value work. I forgot something. When we looked at the flow, there were 87 steps in the flow. And I asked them to identify the value, which ones were the value steps. And the value steps are the steps that directly contribute to the purpose, directly contribute to the purpose for the customer. And out of the 87, there were 7 value steps. Only 7. The rest of them were steps that we put in the organization in our design that we thought were necessary. So part of the experimentation principles were only do the value steps, only do the 7 value steps, don't do anything else. So that was a challenge to remove waste. Okay. They thought I was mad at this point. So make decisions based on evidence, not opinions. So this stops managers coming in and saying what they should do, or this is what I think you should do. So this is, if someone says, oh, I think we should do this, where's the evidence that says we should do this? The experimentation is about learning. It's not about making it into a real prototype. That's what we do in the prototype. So we're here to learn, making mistakes, working together, etc. Making mistakes is how we learn. And we're here to design to meet the demand that comes in. So whatever demand comes in, we meet it. We can't decide we don't like it. And we're going to use digital only when it helps us. Those are the experimentation principles. So in the experiment, which took several weeks, we took 35 cases, 35 demands. And that's an example of the team starting to record that. So you can see the recording is all done on the wall on paper. It's not done digitally. Why do they do that? Because it's visible to everybody all the time. So when I bring managers which are connected to the work into the room, they will see all this around them, and they can go around the room, and we can start talking about what they're seeing. So it's not put on anywhere digital. And what's interesting is that what we record is changed over time. So you can see we've had to add columns because the team have decided, oh, we need to record this. One of the first demands was Ivy, and she was explaining. So what we had to do is we had to phone her up. We got the form, but we had to phone her up. No one had phoned anybody up before. You can't imagine how nervous they were to phone Ivy up. So we phoned her up, and we got an idea as to what her problem was. And her problem was she was getting older. She wasn't able to bend down. She had an accident a few years ago. She's starting to, it's going to be difficult. But she was in a bungalow, which is a house with only one floor, had a garden, and she was having a problem. She couldn't do her garden anymore. She loved her garden, but she couldn't do it. So according to what we had learned about Ivy, is that she wasn't entitled to housing because her need was quite low. There were other people in much greater need. But the property she had was in very high demand, the property that she needed. So there was no way she was going to get housing. No way. But in the old system, we never would have told her that. We would have allowed her to bid whenever she wanted, but we would never have said, Ivy, you haven't really got a chance of getting a property. So where we got to was at the end of day 1 with Ivy, we phoned her up for the 3rd time. And we said, okay, but hang on, you keep mentioning your garden. What about the house? What's wrong with the house? And she said, oh, there's nothing wrong with the house. Yeah, the problem is I have to pay for a gardener to come in, and I can't pay for a gardener. I haven't got enough money. So we put the phone down and we all groaned going, oh, this isn't a housing problem. This is a gardening problem. But because one of the principles was you have to fix the problem that you have, they had to deal with the garden problem. So the next morning they spent time on the internet, and they found a community group that would go around older people's houses and fix their gardens for free. What happened? We put her into contact with them, and we never heard from her again. So the realization from the team when we did 35 of these was 56% were not in housing need that were on the waiting list. 37% were in some need, and 21 were in high need. So out of all the 35 we took, that's what we came out with. How many? So we dealt with every single person of the 35 to completion. Every single one. How many did we house? We housed 2. So what do you think the team and the manager realized over that time? What had happened is that this is a little cartoon where they've been living in this box of this is how our service works and this is what happens. Basically, we open the door to reality and they go, oh shit. What the hell is going on out there? What is going on there is not what we thought was going on. So at this point, the deputy director was really very, very frustrated. Not frustrated, he was very confused and realized that the problem to solve was much greater than he thought. And the team were going, what is this? We've got to do it. This isn't what we thought the service was about. So part of systems thinking is about reframing and about seeing the service from the reality that it is. And by doing that, the problems that they think they have dissolve into a different kind of problem. And you do that by understanding the purpose of the service is defined by the customer. So it's an outside-in definition. And then you use that to define the design of the workflow. So that was the next step, is what does the experiment look like? After what do you do when you finish the experiment, and what's the prototype look like? So the purpose changed from, remember, giving people a house to help me solve my housing problem. And in most cases, you don't give people a house. So a huge change for those people. It was a huge change, because what you do is you have to understand what problems people have with their housing and fix those problems. So from a service design, it's very different from user experience. It's not quite the same as user experience. It's not about personas and shapes. It's about purpose and what matters. That drives the focus of the design. So there is a significant difference between those two. And what we did in the team with it, by this time, the deputy director was engaged with us, I would say at least 1 day a week, because he was obviously very focused now. What are the new measures? We couldn't come up with them, because when you don't house people, how do you measure? How do you measure that? We never quite worked that out, but we experimented with new measures. So the prototype. So this is the old way of working. I'm now going to show you what the prototype, what the new design was. Don't forget, following the principles, only do the value work. Listen to the customer. So someone comes into the office, you sit down with them and they talk. You listen to what they have to say. It is not written down. And I don't have to tell any of you here how and why that's different. In that conversation, you ask them what it is they actually need. Why have they come here? What is the underlying problem that they're trying to solve? And you write those details down on a sheet of paper that you have in front of you. And together with the person that you're sitting with, you assess their level of need together with them. You don't do it in isolation. You do it there and then. Because as you do it, you change the nature of the conversation. You talk about, oh, so you have this physical problem, yeah. And then you start to realize that it's actually something different. And you identify the options that they have together. Are they going to go into rented property? Because actually, there's plenty of rented property. Why can't they go into rented property? Maybe they need to live close to their relatives. So you identify the options together as to what are the best solutions. And in some cases, you're saying, actually, we're not going to help you because you're perfectly able and capable to do this yourself. So you know, we're only here to help people who can't help themselves. So either we house them, or we help them to look for housing themselves. And the level of help depends on their ability to do that themselves. There are people that come in that can't read or write. So we have to help them more than people who just need a little bit of help. And when I say help, some of them have anxiety problems, some of them have all sorts of issues with regard to, they just have very, very chaotic lives. They have lives which they just can't get their act together. They may be single parents. They just need some help sometimes. So what does the new technology look like? We moved from 3 computer systems, forms, letters, the web, to, we started off in the prototype with a A4 piece of paper that we designed on the left. What are the steps? What are the suggested questions that we ask them? And on the right is the record that we keep, that we write down at that point when we talk to them. And we decide what we write down. There's no fixed fields or anything like that. And that's page 2. In this case, we didn't fill out page 2, but in some cases we might fill out page 2. This was the beginning of the new waiting list. So the beginning of the new waiting list started off as a whiteboard. And these were the people that we couldn't help at the moment, but we put them up on a temporary list and we waited to see when we could help them. And we developed an archive system because they had all these bits of paper now. So what do we do with the bits of paper? Oh shit, what do we do with the bits of paper? Let's put them in a box. So let's experiment. So we put them in a box and we will write down on the box every time we need to go back and look at that information. So this is an example of how the team have learnt to design themselves, their own system. And they decided that after 6 months, there was no need to keep the piece of paper because the information was out of date. So after 6 months, they would throw away the bits of paper. And when the same person came in, they would start again with a fresh record. And then that moved to version 2, which was they had the pieces of paper by each officer, each employee. So you can see not terribly high tech compared to the work that you guys do. If you ask them afterwards, this is what they would say. I must engage with people. I talk to them. I listen. I manage cases. We engage and help people. We try our best. It's a good place to work, and we have no IT system yet. It took them 2 years to define and decide what IT system that they would use to help them to do this. But that wasn't the important part. The IT came after they'd redesigned the service. Let's look at some of the outcomes. There were 6,293 people on the waiting list. After two years after doing this, that went to 309. So the waiting list was created by the old system. There was 62.7 failure demand. In the new system, there was 3% failure demand. Remember the 27 appeals a month that they hated? That went down to 1 appeal in every year. There was aggression and frustration in the staff. There was aggression and frustration by the people coming in. Because we were helping them, we engaged and we helped people. And it created staff that became very motivated to do a good job. And in the old system, there was an unknown true cost of the overall social system because we didn't know what impact we were having. And we realized by doing this actually that we created links with other groups that could help people. And actually housing was a very important part of the public sector that we had been treating in isolation. 22 full-time equivalent people, it went down to 15. We only needed 15 people. So it went down in numbers of staff. And a happy senior manager, eventually. Okay, this was the waiting list. So the waiting list over a period of years is the client I worked with was the blue line. And when we fed back to central government, they put out new guidance to help the rest of the councils around the country to try and reduce their waiting list using similar principles, but they didn't really. They did some kind of a job, but not nearly as good. You can see the impact on the waiting list. I probably don't need to go through going through kind of the methodology that I would use at the moment in terms of redesigning. I think that because it's I've taken 45 minutes, I would say that should we pause here, and if I need to go any further, then I will do that separately. Right, are we back to normal? I've unshared the screen, haven't I? So can I just go to the chat, because there was a couple of points there. Pascal, you said, what's the difference by the systems thinking approach to the traditional approach of exploring all stakeholders' needs? Because we didn't care about stakeholders' needs. We only cared about one thing, which was purpose. And what we then did is shared that purpose with all the stakeholders, and they go, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, you're right. There's only one purpose. Therefore, the purpose was shared amongst all the stakeholders, rather than, and this is very different, to asking the stakeholders what their needs are, because they're all different. And that's part of a systems thinking approach. In this case, is you create a shared common purpose. Really important. And Milan, I argue the simplicity of the approach plus the scope of looking at the delivery system as much as the customer experience is what makes this difference. It is different. I would say that is true. I would also, yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think that's one way of putting it. That's actually what we do. We just do that. We kind of leave everything else aside. We leave all the support services aside. We leave all the interference aside. We leave the audit, governance. They all interfere with this service if you allow them to. And with this work for a much larger enterprise with many product and capabilities, they exhibit the same flaws as the original system and lack of experience. Well, all you do is you start up at a local small level. So you start up at a level of each service. So if you go into a large organization, it's made up of a myriad of services. So you start with the main one. So I've done this with a mobile phone company. You start with a demand that comes in, and then you say, right, well, there's all these demands that come in. Let's focus on new members. Let's focus on new members who need a new phone, and let's focus on making that workflow work really well. So you focus on one, I'm hesitant to say product line, service line. So you focus on one service line, and then you start to generate teams that start to focus on, well, what happens when their contract ends? Okay, then we have to add that to it. So it kind of builds iteratively over time. You don't do the whole thing. Therefore, you treat, so the large organizations get treated in a, I don't really know the word, but yeah, it's an iterative growth process all the way through. I mean, there's 8 of us. I think it's probably okay, Wolfgang, to unmute people and ask questions.
Yes, so thanks, John. So, and while people are thinking about their question, of course, I have one, a very intersection-y question. So, you know, we are very keen on making this intersection, and I had the opportunity to talk to you, I think 4 months ago or so. We discussed about the intersection between that more service-oriented, customer-centric way of design, product design. So that's what I perceive when I talk to you. Yeah. So my question is, so that's closer to the red facet, as I understand it. And you also talked about purpose, yeah, the purpose of a certain service. But how is this all related to the purpose of the organization? You know, that's the green bubble. How is the purpose of the service related to the purpose? And how is the whole story related to the blue circle, yeah, to the process? You know, we are analytical thinkers, to the processes and to the IT structures. How do you connect that? That's I'm always interested in this tough question.
Well, when I work in an organization, people come to me and ask those questions, and then what I do is I turn it around and say, you got to answer that. So what I do is I bring them into the team, and then, so let's say a director says, oh, well, that's the purpose of the customer. What about our purpose? And I'll say, okay, well, that's the purpose of your customer. Why have you got a different purpose?
Yeah.
And they won't be able to answer that. If they do, then they are realizing that there is a misalignment between the purpose of the service and their stated purpose, and then they have to decide, oh shit, there's a misalignment. So what does that mean? Does that mean that we have to realign our internal purpose? And the answer is yes. Yeah. Now, this depends on how far they want to go, but if this is done properly, they will realize that their purpose has to be defined outside in. If they define their own purpose and they try and force the product and force the service onto customers, it's unusual for that to be successful. That is successful less. I don't know many examples where that's successful. So by using a new purpose, you reinvigorate the whole organization, and you reinvigorate the director and the chief executive, and they all go, hang on, what about this purpose? So what does that mean for me as a senior manager? What does that mean for IT support? What does that mean for HR? What does that mean for sales? It changes all of that by talking about a new purpose. So that's answering your first question, Wolfgang. And the second one was about process and what else was it? Sorry?
Yeah, process and IT, so the usual architecture stuff.
So what I do is, with the IT is that during the experiment, I bring an IT person into the team. And when they work with the team after a few days, their mind goes a bit strange. And they suddenly realize that this is a different way of working. And the IT person has to align themselves with the principles. So what they start to do is start to see the design for IT is driven by the same principles. So in this case, every person that comes in has got a different need. So from an IT perspective, how do you design that? And the answer is you don't. The answer is there is no IT. And I did this work in 2009 or 2010. Still today, the way that they engage with customers, the customer comes in and they have a conversation with them. There is no IT in the middle of that. So and this is a really important point, Wolfgang, really good you brought it up. In complex systems where you have high variety of demand, is it possible that you may not be able to use IT to capture that demand in the right way? When you do attempt to do that, you have to reduce that demand down because you are forced to use IT. Well, I'm asking the question, why are you using IT then? Because by using IT, you are creating a service that is already out of the right design of what it should be.
Can I add something? Isn't that why we have, instead of business process automation, which indeed, as you put it, you need a process that will work for everyone. That's what you mean, which is not the case. But isn't that why we have things like advanced case management, where you have on a higher level the states, but where you leave a lot of where the IT actually leaves a lot of wiggle room.
Yes.
That's maybe the movement that we see now to accommodate that. So you have a minimum on IT support, maybe to track what's going on, but not tries to put everything in the same process.
Pascal, I think you've described it very well. And what the IT person then does is ask the difficult questions which no one has ever asked in the organization before. Maybe IT isn't the solution here. The solution is to get human being to talk to human being. And how can IT support that? And that can be supported by IT. It's just that then that support part of the organization has to begin to think in different ways. And that becomes part of my role as a facilitator to help that to happen. Yeah. So I'm there in the background with the team, helping these very confused people, and there's not just IT, there's a whole load of them, help to redefine how they understand how an organization works.
Sir, I have another question. Concerning that facilitation, you showed us the slide with the amount of failures. You had, what was it, 75% or so? I think that slide had in the title the word culture in it, right? I was wondering, the things on the failure side, there were a couple of them where you could argue, why was this labeled a failure?
Yes.
So I was expecting in your talk some kind of revisiting that list and asking, should we label this as a failure, or does this actually support the relationship with the customer?
What happens is, because understand is 4 weeks, what they think in week 1 and week 2 changes over those weeks.
Right.
And you're exactly right, Pascal. I allow them to classify it whatever way they want, and they very often classify it in a way which I think, oh, that's not right. Over the next 2 or 3 weeks, they'll then go, hang on a minute, this isn't right, is it? So I will help them to see it's not the right way. And they themselves have to decide which classification it is. And in some cases, that takes several weeks of doing this full time, because it's the change in thinking that's important, not what is actually value or failure. And if the team all decide something different to what I would suggest, I leave it. And it might be like that for weeks. That's part of the learning process and part of the recognition that it's them who design it, not me. I've learned to do that. When I was starting this, I would force them to kind of do it in the way I thought was right. And actually that creates a barrier between me and them, and it stops them from learning.
That's actually another argument to my question is what you're saying is they do the design instead of the business analyst who does the requirements management.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what I have in my head, hopefully, usually, is which direction they should go in. Are they veering away from the principles? Because if I did this in 3 organizations, the design in 3 organizations would be different, because the characteristics of each organization would be different. So they design it around the characteristics of the people that live in the area, of whether it's a city or a small town, some of the restrictions within the organization, the ability of the senior managers to want to do this change, all different things. But it has to be ultimately their decision as to what the design is and how flexible it is and all of that. So although I call myself a designer, I'm helping them to design it.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
John, hi, thanks for this. Again, I
Hi.
think it's really inspiring, actually, this case. I have one question, it's more practical. You talk about for the first of all, who brought you in? You talk about a manager that's really doubtful, that basically tells you that you need to find us 6,000 apartments or housing. He was probably not the one that paid or called you up in the beginning.
No.
How did it start?
How it started was that I was part of a consultancy that was getting recognition across the public sector, and my boss had gone and done a presentation to their directors, and it sounded good, and they said, "Oh, where should we start? Hey, let's start in housing allocations, because there's a little problem there. So let's fix that problem, and we can see how this works." So I worked with the deputy director. Says, yeah, let's do that. The person who said, give me 6,000 houses was the supervisor, not a senior manager.
Mm-hmm.
So it was at a different level. And if you have someone, you have to have a senior manager who wants to do this. And if I do the understand phase, they've got a chance at the end of understand to stop and say, okay, what you've shown me is great. I don't want to go any further. So it's important that there are gates or places at each step where they can decide what they do, and they can decide which direction to take it, and they can decide to ask me to leave. That does happen sometimes, because I also recognize that their senior managers are not in a place where they want to make such a big change. And that's fine. I mean, that's up to them. So we kind of agree to leave it.
But then you got to talk to the local manager there, and you told him, yeah, I need 3 people for 4 weeks, 100%. And I'm pretty sure he said, no fucking way.
Well, that is the toughest bit, Helgi. That's the toughest bit, and in those days when I did this, it wasn't too bad. Nowadays, it's almost impossible. So I've had to change my approach. And I don't have 3 people for 4 weeks anymore.
I'm having difficulty getting 4 people 1.5 hour a week. And it's a constant battle of actually getting people to do something, actually getting access to people. So anything, any inspiration or
yes, I do actually. It has been a big problem, and what we've realized is that if you do this first with a senior manager, so I've learned to do maybe take a senior manager for a day. Ask the senior manager, say, give me a day of your time. And then you show them specific things that you've found. The end-to-end measures, the failure demand. And they'll go, shit, this is a bigger problem than I thought. And I said, look, we've just spent a day doing this and that's not enough. You know, we need to dig this up properly. We need to have a good look at it. Can you give me, who can you give me and for how long? I would say typically I need 4 weeks, but if you haven't got 4 weeks, we can do some of this. We can't do this bit and this bit, but we can do that. So I kind of do a bit of negotiation, but I must have someone who is able to cut time out of their diary. If not, I walk away. And what happened in health and care, social care, 2 years ago is that they spent about 9 months not doing it properly, messing around, and they had part-time team, and after 9 months they got almost nowhere, and the manager said, okay, this is stupid, John, how much time do you need? And I said 5 weeks. And he goes, okay, we're going to have a team, we're going to get that team, and this was a very busy health service. We're going to get a team of these people. I think there were 7 people, and they're going to work with you for 5 weeks. They ended up working with me for 9 months. Because as we work, the manager realizes the value that they are doing. That's the difference, Helgi. You've got to get the managers engaged so that they see the value that the frontline team are doing. And it's much more value than any consultant would ever do, because they're doing it themselves and I'm helping them to do that. So what they actually do is dig up, truly dig up within the system, things that are very valuable to find. Therefore, the manager says, no, we're going to continue with this.
This actually brings me to a point. I had an interview with an architect last week, actually Annika Cleaver, and one of the insights I got from that interview is basically that one of the reasons a consultant is brought in is because the employees don't have the time to think.
Yeah.
And that's actually quite true, that if you want to get people, internal people, to actually engage, you can't find the time in their calendar to do it. But you usually can buy a consultant to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And, it's basically idiotic because, well, what he said was, I probably didn't do anything that they couldn't have done themselves if they just had taken the time. The only thing I did was facilitate and document and doing the things that they didn't do. And yeah, I thought that was a really interesting approach to or insight on that.
That is really interesting. And actually, the problem with that is that I can't tell them that. They have to figure that out themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing I sometimes do is I look for those things that are obvious that maybe we can fix quicker. Yeah. Like failure demand. Failure demand, you can normally find reasons why it's created, and it normally doesn't take much to stop some of that failure demand. Now, if you stop failure demand, that's if you've got a large contact center, well, that might be 3 people in the contact center don't get demand anymore. Now, that's a cost. So you're already saving them money. They go, shit, what else can we do? What else can we save if you spend more time doing this? So they realize that they have to invest. I have to get them to that point. So although I've shown you what I do with the team, I haven't shown you what I do with the leaders, but I do a lot of work with the leaders. Well, Milan, you must have a question. Yeah, and this report business, Jean-Sebastian, I never write reports. So when the senior team want the report, we say, right, let's organize a meeting. So they all think we're going to go into the conference room and all this. we go to the room where the team are waiting for them with all this stuff on the wall, and we spend 2 hours or an hour and a half. The team take the senior managers, these are frontline people, the team take the senior managers through what they've learned, and they have a discussion with them, and it's like a workshop, and we have talk, and we have a laugh, and we go, this is what we found. And it's a very, very different environment, but one that the senior managers find extremely positive, because they suddenly realize that they have learnt far more by doing that than they ever would by a bunch of PowerPoints or a report that no one actually finishes reading. And they also see the excitement from the team. They see the depth of knowledge. They might ask a question like, well, hang on a minute, that data isn't very robust. And the frontline person say, well, it doesn't need to be robust because we were just looking for an indication of, it doesn't matter if it's 37% or 42%. What matters is that it's bad. Now that, from a frontline person to a senior manager, is really powerful, because it starts to change the dynamic of how they begin to work together. And then I keep that connection all the way through. So we don't have someone in the middle. We don't have middle level managers informing the senior managers. The senior managers come into the room, and then they start coming more frequently over the experiment and the prototype.
Yeah, I think it's the best way to approach these kind of problem. I'm having a client like lately, like I've done like some kind of research, like a little bit like you did. And then you say, oh, we knew that stuff. We had some PowerPoints about it. Okay. Then they send me everything, and then I deconstruct, and then there's nothing in that PowerPoint. Do you know your project? And then you start asking questions, and you demolish everything, and then you realize nobody actually read, nobody understand, like nobody understand the project and what are the real problem and what are the real causes and how you can solve them. But most people hire a consultant to give them the answer, or at least like to analyze big stuff and create big PowerPoint. But these people aren't. It's not their job to solve the problem, and they don't live with it. So they do their thing and then they leave. So it's better to make sure like everybody on the floor like understand, and then when you're not there anymore, they have some knowledge at least.
And going back to this methodology, some of this methodology is based on Toyota, the Toyota production system. A lot of the principles come from there. So that's obviously manufacturing, but if you take the manufacturing principles and apply them to service organizations, this is kind of what you get. This is very similar to what they do in Toyota when they engage their staff in, the staff are the people, the frontline people are the ones that do all the design. And the managers are there to support the staff doing the design. So this isn't just been dreamt up. This isn't just something that I came up with. It's not mine. It's got a long history, and some of it comes from Deming, some of it comes from Ackoff and systems thinking. So it does have a strong pedigree there of organizations that have done similar. And obviously you would know that Toyota is the largest car manufacturer in the world at the moment, and by far the most efficient and the one with the lowest quality problems. So the techniques we've used with the team would be recognized in Toyota.
I was wondering, like, it's pretty lo-fi as a way to work with people. Probably because you want people to work with their heads and not their computer. Just wondering, like, how did you do throughout last year with not being able to work in person with people?
That's a good question. The last piece of work I did with them, with the local council, was to prepare for the COVID. So I did exactly this. In 2 weeks' time, we'd set up a team to deal with COVID demands. We didn't even know what the demands would be, but we had 2 weeks to set the team up so that when the demands came in, I need food, I haven't got a place to live, the team would work in this new way. But I had to be there. So you raise a very good point, Jean-Sebastian, which I haven't overcome that yet, because in a transactional system like a bank, you could do a lot of this virtually. As soon as you have complexity in this and you recognize that the change has to be so fundamental, I would probably still need to go in and do this. There has to be someone local. So what I've done with local councils is that I work with people, and then after I work with them, they learn my approach, and then I can be at home and I engage with them virtually, but there is a local person there doing the work. So I don't know the answer to your question, John Sebastian, and I hope that there'll be a time soon where I can go back in and engage. At the moment, with organisations in this country, you can go back in public sector and in private sector and work with them. So it's not an issue at the moment.
Okay, great. It kind of vary from place to place, because like right now there's all the in person, it's pretty lo-fi. You can do it with some whiteboard software like Mural, which is are good, but there's still stuff missing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the next challenges will be the what people call hybrid. So some people in place, some people working digitally, some people working from another country. So like the lo-fi part will be harder, but it's actually the lo-fi is probably the best way to make sure people work and think with their brains instead of with the tools.
It's an interesting issue, and one of the things that I always enjoy is when you've got a group of senior managers and they walk into that room and they see everything on the wall. You can hear and you can watch in their eyes and they go, "What is this?" Now, how can that, if you can replicate that virtually, that's fantastic. But if you can't, then we start to lose things. And I don't want to lose those things, because it's that is the key to helping those senior leaders have to change from the way that they've been working for years and years to a different way of seeing an organization and a different way of dealing with staff and managers and supervisors. Now, if you want to go to that level, the only way is to engage with those leaders in a very personal and direct way. So I have one-to-ones with them, and we talk about what they're seeing. We talk about what they don't like about what the team are doing, and then I have programs that I work with them. So I don't know. I still have to experiment with different ways of doing that, but I think it's a question that we shouldn't just assume we can do everything virtually.
Pretty sure it's going to go back to physical as soon as possible for these kind of conversation.
Yeah. Anything? Yeah. I mean, I hope that was of interest to people. I think in many ways there's part of my concern about engaging with you guys initially is what I'm doing something that is too different to what you guys are trying to do? Is it so different that you can look at what I do and go, that is strange, that's too much for us? But I think my suggestion would be, are there elements in there that you could take, like purpose, like sharing the purpose with all the stakeholders, some of those things, like working with the frontline staff? Are there elements of that are possible to take within the work that you do and maybe help assist with that? You're on mute, Wolfgang.
I just said, all right. It was not a major contribution, just all right.
So do you think, Wolfgang, there are things in what I've just gone through, do you think that would be applicable to the work that you do? And I think, Milan, you've just put a comment. Maybe.
Yeah, and Milan, I agree to that when I listen to you and this top task methodology, and I also sense some experiences. I mean, where I'm working, I'm I think, far away from services and products. That's just not my reality. Other people are doing that, but I'm always keen to connect to them, and that's the intersection. That's the way I'm thinking, but I'm getting better and better in this thinking, so that's good.
I think. Sorry.
I can say that actually for me super inspiring was this demand, value demand, and this failure demand comparison that you did. It's actually it's so super simple actually if you think about it, but actually so super powerful as well. So I for sure will think about it more and trying to think about it how to apply this to one of my works that even works right now. So it's really cool. Thank you for that.
That's fine. And I think value and failure demand is one of those things you can almost take out and go, well, actually, this is really quite straightforward. And it helps to engage with the senior manager when you've got a contact center of 200 people and you've got failure demand of 60%. And suddenly that manager realizes that if you just reduced it to 30%, what saving would you have in the contact center? They go, shit, it's like, wow, hang on a minute. I haven't seen it this way before. And that's a way into a client where you can start with something simple, and if they are of the right mindset, you can start to then build on that and go, okay, why did we have the failure demand in the first place? You've been a manager here for 3 years. Why didn't you see this? What are we focusing on? Oh, maybe we're not focusing on the right things. Let's have a look at our measures. Are there measures that we're doing that are not telling us the right thing? Do we need to look at new types of measures? So it can go into those areas.
Exactly, and as I can imagine, it can go like as well with redefining our purpose in the thinking, like what we are doing here, like why our customers coming to us.
Yeah.
And like we have our own imagination of what is our value, but our customers can tell us a little bit like extended this view and just tell us a little bit different.
Yeah.
And as well with the problems that we face, like this is like a little bit different approach to like just to evaluation and just assessment where the people just like dropping out from the journey or something.
Yeah, I mean, in this situation, this is a good example. The two things that made the deputy director change his mind about doing this was the value and failure demand and the measures. Those are the two things. As soon as he saw those two things, he thought, shit, this is different. I need to become more engaged. I need to work with this. And suddenly he allowed himself to see all these other things. He allowed the team and he allowed me to dig and understand the problem. So I think this is in some ways quite a good example of where we started with something simple and went deeper and deeper. And as long as the senior manager is going with you, that's fine. If you do it on your own without the senior manager, you're in trouble. Because you may be uncovering things he doesn't or she doesn't want to be uncovered, and it makes them look like they've got a service that is poorly performing. So all of that needs to be carefully managed.
John, I have a confession to make. Let me say first that I'm going to leave this webinar really inspired. So I'm not saying that to play nice, because it's true. But maybe you got this already, that it took me a while for your presentation or your message to click with me. At one point you showed the graphs, and then I saw the timestamp, and I was going, oh my God, at that time I was doing business process automation. I was really far ahead from what John was doing, but at one point the lo-fi approach really clicked with me, and then also an extension on that is indeed making the work visible, and that's really something that I'm going to take out of the webinar. But it really took me a while to get into the presentation. Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah.
The problem I have is that I have at the moment with this, I have a standard way of doing it. So especially with doing it to people in all different countries all at the same time, virtually, when I'm trying to do it quickly, I apologize. That's my fault, Pascal. But I'm glad that usually what happens is that at least halfway, suddenly someone, oh shit, yeah, wow, you know, it's like, oh, I've just seen something. And when I do this, you find that different people find different elements of the case study relevant to them.
Mm.
And I think that's quite normal because we're all different. We all work in different ways, and we all have our own specific ways of perceiving what we should be doing. And I think it's reinforcing that. I'm hoping that the case study will just give some ideas about what different things you guys can do that will help what you're trying to do. This isn't trying to show a different approach, and this isn't trying to show that we have different approaches. I think it's trying to show that there is significant commonality by working together with in particular systems thinking is about changing. And this is key, I think, with systems thinking. It's not tools and techniques. It seems to be tools and techniques, but underlying those are the concepts that change people's views of how they see their organization, how they see their customers, or how they see them work as a manager working with my frontline staff. That's what systems thinking actually is. It's about understanding Ivy and her gut problem with the garden, and then going, shit, how many Ivies do we have? Well, about half of the people here are like Ivy. Shit, well, you know, I've been a manager here for several years. Why haven't I seen that? Well, stop. That's the conversation I have with managers afterwards is, why haven't you seen this? What have you been doing? Where have you been sitting? What reports have you been reading? Oh, these reports are shit. The manager themselves says these reports are shit. Okay, well, let's start working on new ones. So yeah, it's a interesting journey for people when it works.
Myself, the thing that when I see stories like this, the thing that always comes up to me is I work in a regional government department, and yeah, there's like 900 people, 9 divisions. They all have a how. The first hurdle I should take is how can I make people stop? It's like the cartoon with the guys with the square wheels and the one with
yeah.
I'm always in that situation, and how do you make people stop and say that you can actually, without bringing in a consultant or just a consultant that helps with the process to make it better? That's something really alien to people. No, to change things, we need a project, and it needs to be a beginning and an end. While what you're telling is a more emergent approach, and is well, you can see what value it brings.
I think the what I now use, if I have a senior manager and I have them, I would say that within 45 minutes of them being with me, I have to show them something that is fundamentally different to what they thought about their service. If I don't do it within that 45 minutes, I've lost them.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I work at the moment. So that kind of answers a little bit your question, Pascal. So I would use whatever I think is most appropriate. And I use different types of techniques. In some cases, it's a flow chart along the wall. And when the flow chart goes along 3 walls in a large room, and you say, that's the workflow of one of your customers, that's enough, right? When they count up the number of steps, and it's 150 steps, and then someone from the front line says, do you know how many value steps are in there? And then the senior manager looks for the value steps and they can't find any. And then the frontline staff said, yeah, that we had that problem. There's 10 of them. That's it. You've got that senior manager. 10 value steps out of 150. They go, I mean, which senior manager can be comfortable with that?
I guess as well, really cool part of this story was one of the outputs that you said that they actually ditched the IT system that they're using at the beginning. And I think that this is like a story for another meeting where you can just tell us a little bit how this process went, because I think in the normal organization, like the IT is so powerful that they will and they invest so much in the the systems that they will say like, no way, we cannot beat our system. We have to improve it or just to make it better. So that's, I think that's as well interesting part.
Well, what I then do is if the system is the problem, then that becomes evident with what the team are doing in the understand phase. And what happened with this case is the deputy director realized that the IT system was the problem, the design of the IT system, and the fact that it channeled everybody down a common process was the problem. It took 7 weeks before he truly understood that. Of me being there full time, it took 7 weeks. So this doesn't happen. Some of the real learning, fundamental learning, takes a long time.
All right. So the final all right for tonight. I think I'm getting tired. Thank you very much for this talk.
Good.
Interesting for me, even if it's a bit far away from my reality, but that's probably the best topics when it's a bit outside of your comfort zone. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, and our next Campfire talk will be the last Wednesday in September. So there will be a summer break. We are always keen on speakers. So if you know somebody or if you want to provide a talk, please send us a suggestion. Yeah, and to all, thanks for your attention. It was a pleasure. And have a successful European Championship, Belgium and England, especially. And Sweden. No, Sweden. Okay, sorry, no Sweden. Yes.
Yeah, that hurt.
Yeah, there was something yesterday and there was something with Italy some days before. So yeah, but have good luck, England and Belgium. Yeah. See you. Bye.
Bye-bye.